Welcome to Macon Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College. Today is March the 14th, 2012, and I'm interviewing Kathryn Stevens and Barclay DuPriest. Mrs. Stevens, we'll start with you. Can you tell us how and when you first came to Randolph-Macon College?
My husband was Hugh Stevens, director of athletics and baseball coach, so that's my first time at the college, and then I came to work at the college as bookstore manager. However, before that, I did work for about a year in the cafeteria in the office. Had I stayed there, I would not have been able to get in the door now. They were very generous with their donuts.
What year was that when you came to?
I came to Randolph-Macon to the bookstore in 1967. Beth Baskin was the bookstore. She was not the manager. She did the textbooks. Catherine Lowry, former dietitian, was the manager of the bookstore, which was a strange mix, but I think they needed a place to put her, and that worked out very well. Beth came to me and said that Carl was going to North Carolina to work on his doctorate. Would I be interested in her job? And I thought about it, and I said, Beth, yes, but not if you're going to take it when you come back, because I feel like I will be learning something and it would be a job I will enjoy, but I don't want to give it up if I like it. If I don't, you can have it back. And she said, oh, no, I did not intend to come back and take the job.
Okay, good. Barclay, you want to tell us how you came?
Oh, I can tell you, I remember the day I was teaching at Hanover Academy, and Mrs. Stevens' daughter, Elizabeth Ann, was teaching next door to me, as we had for years together. We were in the teacher's lounge, and Liz said, Barclay, did you hear Mom is going to retire after all these many years? Now, everybody knows that everybody in the town of Ashland wants a job at Randolph-Macon so you can get that wonderful free tuition for your children. Without knowing what a joy this job was going to be to me, and I just knew everybody loved Kathryn, and if Kathryn liked it, I thought surely I could do this and I would love it too. So I came in, I snuck away on it was my break time. I didn't have a class then, and came running into Kathryn's office, and she said, yes, she was going to retire and that I needed to submit an application that the other people, including a man, remember that, Kathryn, a man director who was taken out to lunch when he came to visit. Oh. She did, and this was in...
Not by me.
This was in, none of the women applicants were taken out to lunch. Anyway, this was in May of 1985. During that time, I wrote to Mr. Ball, who was the treasurer of the college, about 1 million, a slight exaggeration, notes, thanking him and I noticed when I was in his office on his desk, there was a copy of the 10-minute manager, the 5-minute manager, whatever. I saw it on his desk, so I immediately bought a copy of that and read it so that the next time, I came back, I was ready, and I went to visit bookstores. I went to visit 2 bookstores, and I will never forget, he said, and of course you told them why you were there visiting, and I said, no, I didn't want them to know that Miss Stevens was retiring. They might apply for the job. And he said, very good. And I thought, oh, my God, this is one good thing. Anyway, it was like one of the greatest days, and the very reason that I am here is because Kathryn Stevens gave me this opportunity. We can't fool anybody here. This lady, I owe my whole life at Randolph-Macon College to her. And so that was way back then, and I am privileged and delighted to be sitting in this room with her today.
Well, it's been a fun thing to see Barclay come in and take over being a little teacher who who knew it would be such a perfect fit, because she loves the students, and that's a big part of that job, is your contact with the students. And they love her, and it's worked out wonderfully. I retired, semi-retired, because I worked in the bookstore a couple of days a week for several years and just loved it and could see how Barclay was taking over. And we were just coming into the computer age. I had been messing with the computer for a while, and I think had I been a little younger and stayed a little longer, I would have loved it, but I was very frustrated at the time. I had no training for it. So this is where Barclay could take over and learn and know a lot more than I did about a
But Kathryn,
computer.
I need to interrupt you here and let everybody know what an unbelievably ideal situation this was. Mr. Ball, after Kathryn convinced him to hire me, said, well, absolutely, she knows nothing about being a bookstore manager. And Kathryn said, what if I stay on part-time and I will help train her? She made it as easy for me as possible. I do remember, though, that after about a month and a half, Kathryn said, I'm leaving you. I'm really going to the beach for a week. The register, I couldn't get it open. I actually started crying, went into the snack bar where Buddy Tisto was working, and he came and helped me with that old register. But what I wanted to say was, you can't imagine anybody who was formerly the boss letting me completely take over and working for me while she had to teach me everything. It was unbelievable. And I would come into work and say, Kathryn, I really don't like that fixture. It doesn't have, she'd say, get rid of it. I've wanted to do it for years. Anything I said, she said, you make that decision. But
by that time, I was ready to let you make the decision.
But the fact that she came in when we didn't have a textbook manager. When we came in, Kathryn had done everything. Not cashiering all day.
Well, I
she'd
did
done
at
everything.
times.
So then when I had her there, I actually had her there with me. And some of the things that she wasn't able to do, she would encourage me to do, like develop the used book business more than that we were buying it from the kids.
Right.
We would have books shipped in. All the things could be done a little bit more. But how could it be to come every day and know you were going to change everything around, and the person who fixed it the first time would clap her hands and say, well done. It takes a special woman to do that.
Well, we came a fair piece in that bookstore from where I started in the basement of Mary Branch. And that we had one room, and we had a storage room and Kathryn Lowry's office. And I got my children to, they helped me at times. My girls were old enough to, and helped me unpack books. And one time we ordered Randolph-Macon plates. I think there are a few around from Wedgwood, and they were shipped from England. The cartons, the barrels were out in front, right there in the courtyard of Mary Branch. And that's where we unpacked every one of those plates. And that it was an interesting place to see the girls and the boys, because by that time then they started with the girls and with them with their little kitty cats up in their dorms. And it was a very interesting place. And, you don't know any better, so we thought it was great.
So when you started, you were in the basement of Mary Branch.
In the basement.
And can you talk about the spaces a little bit, where you moved on campus?
Well, then we moved to the bookstore that is now in the Student Center from Mary Branch. And
In the 70s, I guess.
I forgot. I meant to check to see when that was built. But at that time, Don Reed was treasurer. And we had someone to work on the design. We thought the design was wonderful. Since then, I understand from certain people, they think it was pretty awful, including Barclay.
Well, it didn't have a loading dock, Kathryn. It didn't.
Where would you find
the show? I remember you said we always should have a show window, that you wanted that, and you weren't given that.
We didn't. Well, there were a lot of things we really
wanted, but you couldn't get.
Right. We had to do with the space that we were given, and from moving from the basement of Mary Branch, we thought we died and gone to heaven. It was wonderful, but we still realized we did not have a lot of storage space because we had room in the back, a storage room which was not very large. And we did change my office at one time after we started. Kind of forgotten. We had a window looking out on the bookstore right there at the office. We closed that up. We did.
Kathryn, I thought it was kind of put in backwards. It was supposed to be a window to look out, but we could hardly see the people through that, couldn't we?
Right.
We weren't sure, so
so
it ended up with me putting corkboard over it so I could put pictures on it.
Yeah. It really was, it served no purpose, really and truly, unless I wanted to sit there and just stare out all day, and certainly didn't have time for that. But I had just 2 part-time people working. One would work 3 days a week, and one worked 2 days a week. So, and then I bought the textbooks and the clothing and everything, supplies and everything.
Can you talk about the ratio of textbooks to Randolph-Macon paraphernalia to other kinds of books and supplies in the store, and how that changed over time?
That changed considerably because we had just so much space, and it was taken over by textbooks mainly in the beginning. But then as time went on and Barclay started developing more of the clothing line and the other things that appeal to college students, it was quite different.
And Kathryn, now it's very, very different because the students are buying so many of their books online that our textbook department is diminished substantially. And it is down, and I know in planning the new bookstore, I have heard Paul Davies, our treasurer, say, that the consultants that have advised us that is the shrinking textbook section, that we can replace that with books. Not with books, but with clothing, with other gift items. But it's very, very, very different. And Kathryn was the one who encouraged me to get Champion sweatshirts. And I remember the first time she let me make a decision on a design. The salesman was there for 50 minutes. It was one sweatshirt and one design, and I think it basically was Randolph-Macon over college. Finally, Kathryn said, I think we'd better move on and just accept this design. Carl Moses, I remember, we'll never get out of that. Anyway, when Kathryn was there in the summer, she was by herself except for if we had our children or our little bookstore employees.
In the summertime, I loved to take vacation, but I almost dreaded it because when I came back to a bookstore full of cartons of books.
Oh, right.
And it was, where do I begin? And I hired my children, and I also, a neighbor, Toby Bryce, was one who worked for me. And it was tremendous to come back to that. And then you also had whatever clothing I had ordered and things like that.
Supplies.
And we also, back at Mary Branch, this was one thing, we sold the college gym suits, the shorts and the shirts.
That they had to
And the athletic supporters and the
anything needed for those gym classes.
anything that they need. And that was we finally ended up selling a package deal, I think, as well as I can remember. But by the time then that we moved, we did have that sort of thing in the new bookstore, but they weren't as required as much as they were in the beginning. They could.
I had one after we had Toby. Because I have to mention everybody so they'll be on this tape. I had Adam Raboon, John Raboon's son, whom we affectionately referred to as Squirrel, and he adopted that, I believe, on his maybe on his Facebook page. He went on as Squirrel, and Toby and Adam would devise things that only Kathryn and I would know about, like the Lapret's method. He would name some way of putting them on the shelf for the French book and whatever. He was great. And then I had Campbell Tucker, Susan and Woody Tucker's. Woody is an alum. Son came in and helped too one summer. And sometimes Greg Waters' daughter, Olivia, would come in when she was about 4 years old and help. She always wanted to.
She was smart as she could be.
People were very good because I remember in those days, we didn't have deliveries made to the physical plant building wasn't even there, the big one that is now. And often Kathryn would say, and it proved right, they delivered them out on Henry Street in front of the bookstore. You had to be careful to find out when they were coming in because they would leave them there, and we didn't have all the wonderful people running around golf carts and things to bring us to us then. So it was definitely hard. You know, it was harder then. Now it's harder in a different way. We're trying to, plan the new bookstore wisely. Now, Kathryn, our old bookstore that I call her, our old bookstore, not your first one, was 1,800 square feet. The temporary bookstore we're in now is 4,200 square feet.
When I walked into the temporary one, I told Barclay, I said, "You think you've died and gone to heaven." This is if you could just keep that, it would be wonderful.
And brick it up, Kathryn said. But we're looking forward to Macon, in case you're listening to this, Macon Rock, we're looking forward to our new bookstore. It will be different. It will be just a little bit larger than the previous bookstore in the campus center, but the configuration will be different. It'll have a mezzanine area, and we think it'll be just great. But it is fun that the college gave us 6 trailers put together, amazing, for our temporary home. So that is fun. I mean, like space, we've had space you and I would never dream of.
Oh, no.
And Kathryn, the space that she had, we have a big storage unit in the back. We have other storage units and upstairs that she would have died for to have. Mm-hmm. Storage is a major, major problem.
Right.
Well, and it changed so much because when you were running the bookstore, the students, whoever was registered for that class, had to buy that book, and they had to buy it from you.
That's exactly
and
right.
Now, since I've been here, now it's like a little formula. It's kind of a guessing game how many books to buy, and even now.
Well, that was always a guessing game.
They didn't always buy all the books?
No.
Oh.
And a lot depended on the professors.
Kathryn had the best system.
I'll have
Your
to say that.
Great.
That it depended a lot on how much the professor wanted to use that book, what he thought of the book. Sometimes he ordered them and didn't think they were that great. We had books to return. That was another big thing. You had to return books, pack them up, ship them out, and so you had to go through and keep an inventory of a certain. It's a guessing game, but you didn't. The professor really didn't know for sure how many he'd have in his class, and some professors didn't have as many as they really thought they should have. But they would order, say, 40 books when there might be 20 in there. Mm-hmm. So you learned sort of who was.
I watched the master at work with this. Right. Kathryn would know, and she'd also know which professors, the students, some of them, if you had a professor that used the same test over and over and over again, the kids knew, I don't need to buy a textbook. Now, that was not often. Some textbooks, I remember the kids would say, Ronald Moore he didn't need to use the textbook because if the professor taught so well, they said, this is a wonderful class, we don't really need a textbook.
That's right.
But now, of course, the kids get them online, and now the professors are required to put them online, so the kids over the summer, for that semester, are buying their textbooks. But still, some expect us to have them.
That's right.
And it's if it's an out-of-print book, we can't get it, but they can buy an individual copy on Amazon somewhere, so it's entirely different.
And it's changing all the time.
Yes.
Right. All right, well, let's see. Who were some of the campus characters?
Oh, I did write that down. We had one that I remember very well. His name was Wright. His family lived here in town. I remember he had a sister, and she lived on Thompson Street. And he ran around with a sailor hat on his head. He was not completely with it, I don't think. And he also had maybe a little drinking problem. And he would run around and say, "Hey, matey." He was always matey, talked to him and tipped his hat. He was at all the football games. And then we lived on Henry Street, and the football coach's house was on the corner. Ours was the next house, and then the parsonage, Methodist parsonage, was right next door. And with started, now I think he did skip the parsonage, but he started coming by Saturday nights after the games, and he would, if I opened the door, he would say, "Is Coach here? Coach, talk to Coach." And I'd say, call Steve, and giggling when I did it because I knew what was coming up, and, "Coach, do you think you might just have just a little drink? Just a little drink I might have? Do you think? And Steve did not have a little drink for him. But then he would go to the football coach's house. So he eventually went to Williamsburg, and that's where he spent his days. But he would send my husband a postcard every now and then, and written very hard to understand, but every space on the postcard was written on the sides, in the middle, all around. And he is one that I definitely remember.
And Kathryn remembers, I have a third one after this, but the second one, Kathryn was here longer than this, but this is when I came dating my husband when I was at Randolph-Macon Women's College in the 60s. And that is when I first saw Snookums on the field. Snookums was a tiny little black man, wasn't he, Kathryn? And he always wore one of the Randolph-Macon beanies that the students had worn. And when did they wear those, Kathryn? Up until like 68 or something like that, right?
Yeah,
or 65.
right. Yes, I barely remember them wearing them
but
when
anyway,
I was
Snookums
first
had
came.
his. And Snookums could be, Kathryn's description of width could also be applied to Snookums, and particularly the drinking part, too. But Snookums was a fixture in the athletic part of our campus on the games. I have seen films of games. They said that when they played some big playoff game, there is everybody, and there is Snookums jumping around on the field. When they taped some game, Kathryn, they televised one of the big, leading up to that or something. There's all this cable. I've seen the films of this. And Snookums is like falling over it, tripping over the cable, and they're looking at him, but he is on there. Now, he would come, he'd say, like, "You got a quarter? Got a quarter?" or something. But he would also go.
And he hung out in Coon's barber shop.
Yes.
That's where he spent his days.
I've seen one of the yearbooks. I've seen a picture.
He
of him
is.
in
Yes.
one of the yearbooks.
Yes, I'm sure.
And he was, people will ask, now, I don't know, I've heard Kathryn talk about I know about Snookums just from watching him. But then our other campus character that we've had who's no longer with us, but still alive and well, is Dickie Champ. Champ worked
Well,
here.
see, he was after my time.
But Kathryn, he was soon after your time because Dickie Champ came to work. He always said he'd been here 40 years. I don't know, but he came after he graduated from Patrick Henry, and he worked in the athletic department. Then he worked in the dining hall, and he was involved in every bit. There are pictures of every kid. I even judged air band contests.
I have not
with
seen
Champ.
him around.
Because he lives in Fredericksburg with his brother now after his mother died. But the older kids, if our students would now think they're really old kids, the people that graduated like in the 90s and stuff will come back and say, "Barclay, where's Champ? I've promised James from Alabama. What is James? James will bring, and Emma will bring their children. They used to take them over to the dining hall just so they could meet Champ. And whereas Snookums was a tiny little man, Champ was big and hulking, and he had thick glasses because he had some condition. He loved Randolph-Macon, but he certainly did. And and Champ used to sometimes get in a little trouble for his involvement at fraternity houses. I don't mean with the girls and no, not like that. Just drinking and just having too much fun. And he stopped. He completely stopped that, straightened up his life, and then he realized that his health, and if anybody listens to this, they'll be glad to know that his health has greatly improved since he's been living with his brother in Fredericksburg. But those characters were something else.
And I don't think we have any right now. We've got a few faculty characters.
But we don't,
But
yeah.
But we don't have any real characters.
We
I
don't,
think.
not quite. And they were
Like
involved.
that.
And the real campus characters were always involved with athletics.
Oh, definitely.
They were. Our
they
football
drew them.
teams. They bled yellow and black, orange, lemon. Excuse me, lemon and black.
That's right, lemon.
One thing Kathryn told me when I came here that I can't tell you, it's like the wisest thing. It wasn't advice or anything. She was just describing things to me. And she said, and I agree, our jobs were probably the best jobs on earth because they were so multifaceted. Number one, we came into contact with the prospective students when they came through on that. So we befriended some people and hopefully helped convince them to come to Randolph-Macon. Then for 4 years, they were ours. We could laugh, and boy, you can laugh at college students until you're blue in the face. They're wonderful. Then after that, where do they come back for homecoming? Where do they come to get the sweatshirts for their little children?
Yeah.
And then as old grads. I have people that come in the bookstore all the time. I feel like I've been there forever. Well, I have. But say, have you seen Miss Stevens? Have you seen Miss Stevens? And
Yeah,
it'll be
they are
some
great.
of Coach's old players who remembered and loved her coming back to tell me to tell her hello.
We have the great alums that have been very, very, very friendly and keep in touch. They weren't necessarily connected with athletics, but I've had some very successful alums who have kept in touch, and it's very rewarding. I enjoyed every minute of it. Well, maybe not every minute. There may have been a few, but mostly it was a wonderful job, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was not trained for it, and Barclay said she wasn't. I certainly wasn't. It was something I just fell into, though I had worked in business before, but not anything like that. So it was a great, great job.
You had been in Ashland, though, for quite a while before you started that job.
Yes.
You were raising a family, presumably.
Right. I did not start to work until I have four children. The youngest one was in school, probably in second or third grade, and I began to get a little bored. And also, you know what college people made back then. My husband was not at the top of the scale. I don't care if he was doing 5 jobs at a time. But I thought we could use the money. And that's when I knew the job was open at the cafeteria, and that's when I went over and applied for that. And realized really and truly it was not after about 6 months or so. It wasn't something I wanted. And fortunately, Baskin came forward with this offer. And I worked very well with Kathryn Lowry because I knew her when we lived on Henry Street. The cafeteria was right out our back door. And we saw Kathryn frequently. She would come over to visit. And anyway, so we knew each other, and she was very fond of my husband. So that worked out very well.
Well, now, can we talk about your husband for just a few minutes?
Sure.
Because I would love to get those kind of memories, too. He graduated from Randolph-Macon, let's see, what do I have here?
41.
And 41, right? And then he came to work at the college in 48?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so, do you have any memories of Dr. Moreland?
Oh, wonderful memories of Dr. Moreland and Mrs. Moreland. They were just delightful, down-to-earth, wonderful. My husband just thought Dr. Moreland was a wonderful person, and he was. He was interesting. He was, and Mrs. Moreland was. She was the type that if they were sitting there at dinner and finished dinner, and Dr. Moreland would say, well, I need to go to so-and-so meeting or something. Helen, why don't you come with me? She would get up from the table and just walk out. They didn't have help or anything. They had the girls. And she was just very relaxed. And one day, when he entertained prospective faculty, or they would go to the Hermitage Country Club, which was right up on Route 1 at that time, and have lunch there. And he was a teetotaler, definitely. But his favorite dessert was cream de mint parfait. And he made a big thing of, well, you just have to have that. But, of course, we don't drink. But he loved cream de mint parfaits. And one day, Mrs. Moreland called me, and she said, Kathryn, we're up here at the club, and we don't have any flowers on the table. And if you go over in my yard and pick something just to bring for the table. And I went over, and I cut the flowers, and because we were invited for the lunch. And she had spread out on the bushes some white linens that she had washed. And, of course, they said that if you laid them out on the green like that they would bleach nicely. And she had laid them out there. So I cut the flowers and took them down, and she had a little bowl and arranged them and was very satisfied. It was no big deal. They were great people, great. They had wonderful family of girls, and
I went to college with Louisa, with Dr. Mullen's granddaughter. She was at Randolph-Macon Women's College with me. So she told me about that when I came and first met Dr. Mullen. We had that, and we always had.
So you knew Dr. Mullen as well?
I knew Dr. Mullen. He would come in and buy stamps from us. And every day he could just remember that I knew Louisa, and he'd go, Barclay, and you not let me tell you about Louisa. And he would do that. But then Dr. Mullen, after he retired, he moved into my neighborhood. He was on my block. So
after
when Eloise and Piccolo, both alums of the college, had a big 4th of July thing for our neighborhood, Dr. Moreland, he had a chair of honor right by the beer keg, but he wasn't drinking any. And Dr. Moreland would get up and bat. And how old was he then, Kath? And he'd bat, and the kids would run around for him. But so he would love to sit there and listen to that Susan music and that. But just a fine gentleman.
Oh, definitely, he really was.
And Kathryn, how about tell the story? You know the story that Eloise used to tell me about the girls playing, run around the dining room, but jump around, but don't touch the floor?
No, I don't know that story.
Oh, that's right, because Eloise is there. I mean, Eloise grew up with them, and they really did. And Mrs. Moreland would take a little nap in the afternoons. When she got too tired, she'd say, girls, be good. I'm going up and take a little nap. And they would play the game that you jumped from like a sideboard to the table. You could never touch the floor. And they would jump around, and then Eloise says she remembers, like if they accidentally broke something, Miss Moreland would say, girls, is anyone hurt? And they would go, no, ma'am. And she'd say, be careful. And she never.
Oh, my goodness.
And she would make cookies, wouldn't she, Kathryn, for like.
Oh, yeah, she did. I do have this was one of my husband's favorite stories when he hired my husband. He came to him. My husband was hired first as not as baseball coach, because the baseball coach was here. But he definitely Dr. Moreland wanted him over here as general manager of athletics, I think was the title. So he took him to Barnes Drugstore, and they had a Coke, and Dr. Moreland told him he really wanted him here at the college, and he mentioned the salary, and he said, now, Hugh, I'd appreciate it if you don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody what I've offered you, this amount of money. And Dr. Moreland said, and my husband says, and I don't believe for a word he said this, but he may have. He said, Dr. Moreland, that's fine. No, I'm not proud of it either.
I wouldn't tell anybody.
As we always say, you don't work at Randolph-Macon for the money. You just work here for the
love
experiences, for the love of the college and all the wonderful things it affords us.
That's right.
Yes. And Mrs. Moreland was great at that. When you had children, she always brought a little something, and she would come to visit. She was very personal, very warm, very, very good person, and they had a wonderful relationship.
Well, did his being such a strict teetotaler and being so open about that, did that influence the culture of the college?
Well, there was no liquor served at any college function, and if I thought he was coming in the door, the glass went under the. We did not acknowledge, to my knowledge, anybody that there was that we took any part in alcohol.
But what about the students on campus? Surely he knew that they drank.
Yes, I'm sure he did. I don't remember it honestly being a real big problem at that time. I may have had my head in the sand, but I don't honestly know.
Now, I don't remember because I wasn't actually here when Liddell was here, when Liddell Payne, when I came.
Right.
And I can tell, and it's interesting, when one of your questions you had suggested to us maybe was about how the kids have changed over the years. Well, things were very different regarding alcohol and partying and everything here, and it maybe is not what you expect I'm going to say. I remember when I first came in 1985, I remember going to Camptown weekend, and I went out in front of Mary Branch, and there were kegs of beer all over and porta potties, and the faculty and staff were there. I was there. Ira was there. He was probably checking on everybody, I'm sure. But, I mean, and I thought, my goodness, this is quite amazing. And that was back in 1985. Then the tailgate areas, the tailgate started building up. And during Liddell's time, and that got out of control. And being in the town, the kids never understood about why Hampton Sydney was so lax about stuff, and we were definitely more strict because we are in a town. These are town streets. Our in the parking lot, it was that, and so that's why when things changed, they did. Dr. Martin had a hard time and that was a time of great disconnect for us because we did not have the tailgates, but. Regardless of whom they had decided should be our president, I'm sure the trustees at that point with the Princeton Review thing gave the directive that you must do something about this, and they did. The bad thing was that cutting it out entirely did produce that disconnect. There were fraternities that were gone. People would come back and they try to meet in the bookstore tent, even there to find somebody. There was no place. Right. There's none of that. We have recaptured now that relationship, that connection between alumni and students. But I think that as the laws got more restrictive and kids, you can't drink. You cannot drink until you're 21, says the law. Right. We have to do that, and the other laws, it's hard. College kids think it's a time to experiment and everything, but it's really hard. And
unfortunately, or fortunately, one way or the other, a lot of them are brought up in homes where it is accepted, and they probably are allowed to in their homes. I think a lot of them before they're 21 years old.
I think so, too. And, Kathryn, I think one of the things that's definitely true, because Randolph-Macon used to get a bad rap about this. My friends at the other schools would say, this is crazy. Our kids, why does that... and what in the world was I going to say? Oh, I remember when in interviewing kids, not my interviewing, but when we had done professional interviews with things, nobody started, the kids who were partying started partying at Randolph-Macon, as Kathryn said. They came here with this mindset. Right. We did not create that mindset. Now, I think that people are, I don't know, I think this is just a common problem, but we do now at college functions. We certainly do have alcohol for a while. We could not have a cocktail hour with the scholarship donors or the trustees if students were going to be there. Right. Now they are students carefully, and students are not going to try to drink if they're delighted to have a chance to interact with other people. Now the seniors can if they're 21, right. And that's part the college feels that making connections, the moment of connection is important. Anything that would make big donors feel comfortable, right. And students happy to meet them. we're not going to be so restrictive about that. And the college
And I remember going to Mount St. Mary's to tournaments, and afterwards they would have a cocktail hour. And I thought, whew, we will never have this at Randolph-Macon.
Yeah.
And they would have some of the students there. Some of the priests were there, and the faculty, and some of the students. And I thought, ooh, this is really strange on a college campus. But then,
Yeah.
and under controlled circumstances, I can't see why it's bad.
Anyway, we can get off the partying if you want to.
Yeah, all right.
I certainly did think it was fun to come to the K house when I was in college, but
Well, that was one thing. My husband never put his foot in a fraternity house when he was faculty. Once he was on the, now we went to a couple of fraternity parties when we were dating, but we never put our foot in. And we were invited sometimes. He would not go. He did not want to. If there was one of his players out of hand, or
Right.
he didn't want to be involved. He didn't want to see it. Right, right, right.
So you were dating him when he was a student here?
Oh no. He was at Henry Clay. And
And where are you from originally?
well, I was born in Richmond, but I was raised in Albany, New York, and my husband used to say my father was one jump ahead of the sheriff. We moved around. We lived in Albany, and he bought a business in Charleston, South Carolina, and we moved down there. And then they moved to Chicago, and that's when I was not too happy about being up there. And I came down here and went to work. Yes, I actually met him on a blind date. My cousin's husband was a fraternity brother, and she said, "I've got the man for you." And she
was right.
saw, somehow or other, she was right.
That's great. That's very good. Well,
And our first date was the University of Richmond football game. Can you imagine how much fun that was?
Kathryn, you had to show
We
Coach
did
how
come
much
back
you
and go
loved
to a
sports.
fraternity party afterwards. Yeah, it was back when Randolph-Macon played the University of Richmond football.
It's fun for me because some of those kids that were my first kids, and Kathryn's not last, but close to her last kids, that are funny, like Frankie Strice and George Druce and Berman and all those guys over there. They're funny, and now just to see them with their children, and there's 7 children that I consider my children who have children here at
Yeah,
Randolph-Macon
right.
now. How much fun is that to watch Randolph-Macon students come back and bring their students?
Yeah.
And it is a place where relationships are nourished and treasured and built on.
We have a board member, Alan Rashkin. The Rashkin family, his mother and father, way back when I was in the bookstore, never put their foot on this campus that they didn't come in and see me in the bookstore. I have had the most wonderful notes from that family. They are without, and to me that's Randolph-Macon. They are just, and Alan to this day I think is still just, he's a very dear person.
And now he's the chairman of our board of
He
trustees.
is, and he is wonderful. He is great.
He is a wonderful man.
I hadn't thought about the bookstore being the place that you, like you said, the continuity between the prospective student to the student to the alumni. It's
Yeah.
very true. You
Yes.
really are.
A lot of times it's their first contact other than the admissions. Mm-hmm.
But that's where they come in on admissions weekend. That's when they want to get you to the bookstore. They
Oh,
want you to buy
yeah.
the sweatshirt before T-shirt before you leave, so that you already
Publicizing our college.
and kind of feeling it. That's right.
But it is important that we do play an important role there in welcoming people and making them and making that connection. And in fact, the college realized one time, I realized that the best thing we could ever do, and the college piggybacks things like this sometimes when they can, was when we were open for an admissions open house, and it was the day that people were left over from parents, family week, family. And there were the prospective students, and in came the parents who were so happy and their children loved Randolph-Macon. And that was a great moment of connection.
Right.
Things like that, and the college knows anytime you can bring people together, it's really important.
Because the parents will connect with each other and say, oh,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
Right.
that's a big influence.
And they want to know, is your child happy?
Well, just thinking about the big picture for a little bit, can you think about what were your most satisfying times, or a very satisfying good day at the bookstore, or a satisfying experience?
When every student got their books and we didn't run short. Oh. You know, I can't think of many days that weren't satisfying. As I say, it was tricky during rush. That was always a mad time, but a fun time also.
Rush, not
No, I
Greek
know what you
fraternity
meant.
rush. Yeah.
I know what you meant. Yeah. How about you?
But
Can you
it
think of
does.
anything
I
else?
agree. Everything is wonderful. I'll tell you one thing, and Kathryn will certainly agree with me about this. If you are someone who cannot stand to be interrupted, don't be the manager of the Randolph-Macon College bookstore. Probably the most frustrating days, but some of the most enjoyable are when you get absolutely nothing done.
Right.
You never
At
know
your
whether
desk.
there's an old alum coming in, a young alum bringing the baby in for you to see the baby, whether it's a prospective student tour says, could you tell us about the bookstore? And you never know, or if something catastrophic is going to happen. You are there because you're a place of business.
That's
you
right.
can't go hole up in your office and say if somebody says, I want to see Kathryn, of course she's going to come out and talk to them. So you have to be used to those interruptions, but they are great interruptions.
Yeah, they are.
What could
We had two students who came in one year, and they were on their way to spring break, and, we're going to the beach. We're going to Virginia Beach. And I said, Sue Robertson worked in there, and Laverne Kaiser. We all happened to be there that day, and we said, we just don't want to hear any more. Just go on and have a good time. You're just rubbing it in. And they came back after spring break, and they said, well, we just had the best time. And I said, I don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. Well, they brought us a big box of saltwater taffy.
Oh.
Nice.
And they one of them entertained the Queen in Williamsburg.
Oh, wow.
Phil
Phil Emerson.
Philip Emerson, who is the head of the Jamestown mission. Yes, Phil Emerson, yes.
He's a very, very, very dear person, and his friend Bob. I'm terrible with names. I'm afraid, a little old, but they were big buddies, and they brought us back a great big box of saltwater taffy. Wanted us to know while they were sipping their margaritas on the beach, they were thinking about us.
But it is fun.
But those were wonderful
The
days.
students are wonderful, and some of the students, like Regina, who wrote me 5 bad checks, is one of my dearest friends and brings all of her children to see me at all times. And she says, now, here is the lady that I wrote 5 bad. Regina would give me a credit card that wouldn't work, and then write a check that didn't work, and then give them a... Anyway, she's a very successful businesswoman and just proud of her roots there at the RMC bookstore. And when they come in on funny things, and I remember Taylor Bigley, who married Joanna Webb, one of our students there, a darling Randolph-Macon couple. They probably graduated in 94, 95, something like that. And when Taylor came into my office and said, this was when he was a freshman, and he said, but I meant, Barclay, do you mind if I try on these shorts? And we would let people take shorts out in the bathroom. And I said, sure. And I went to answer the phone, and I looked over there, and his jeans were on the floor.
He was trying them on right in front of
He
you.
had tried them on right there in front of me, and he said, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't mind, did you? I went, look, Taylor, and I have told that story before at a large gathering and embarrassed Taylor. I think senior class banquet, I embarrassed him, but it was so cute and so funny. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I told his mom, he didn't think, he just thought he'd just try them on and then see what I thought.
All right.
But they are,
Bottom.
but what could be better than to spend your every working day with people 18 to 22 years
Oh,
old?
yes.
Oh, my goodness. Or with people 78 to 100 years old with the older alums. And then, well, I'm one of those groups now. I'm not an official old alum, but anyway.
You're moving along.
But anyway, that's right. Yesterday was my 65th birthday. I can't believe that I was 65 years old. But Kathryn's a little older than I am.
Just
Thanks.
slightly.
Anyway, it is. Can you tell it's fun? But it is hard work. I don't want to.
It was
demean our wonderful
hard.
jobs.
It was very hard work back there when
Kathryn,
I was
you
doing it all.
especially worked hard. I spend a lot more time talking than you did. In fact, Dr. Payne, I remember Dr. Payne's, he said two funny things to me that I never knew he was
tell me the
listening.
stories where the presidents come in the bookstore. I want to hear that. Presidents
Dr.
bookstore.
Payne would come whistling in. You'd know when he was coming because he was whistling usually, or sometimes he'd sneak up on me. And I remember it was when the lottery was just first come out. And everybody was talking about what'd you do if you win the lottery. And they said to me, what would you do if they win the lottery? And I said, well, I would just quit my job, give all the staff members at Randolph Macon a lot of money. And I said, I would just come back every day, and I could just sit over there and plan all your social lives. And one kid said, well, kind of, isn't that what you do, all you do anyway? And I heard this voice behind me said, yes, DuPriest, and I'm waiting to hear the answer to that question. And it was Liddell. And he said, and I said, of course that's not what I do. And one other funny time, after a football game, I think I was hugging the quarterback or somebody, whoever. We had beat Hampton, Sydney, and I ran up, and Liddell said, DuPriest. He always called me that, so I called him Payne usually. He said, DuPriest, do you know if we had a male bookstore manager, he would never be able to get away with female students, get away with the stuff you do with the males? And I went, do I have to stop? And he said, carry on. And I've been hugging him ever since. But anyway. Sometimes he's funny. He will call or send an email. Dr. Payne gets the faculty email. They make sure he did, so he knows what's going on. You know, it's wonderful. Because he and Jean are just completely still involved in the life of the college. But every time I'll put out something like, I said we were going to have the vendor come in for the trunk show, and I said, and they're going to have pashminas, and here from California will come that, what is a pashmina? You know, Dr. Payne will say, when he will reply to my thing saying the bookstore's open tomorrow, he goes, oh, Lord, working entirely too much.
Oh, that's cute.
He's so funny.
Response to those
That he's
emails.
done. He does. He likes to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I remember I called him the day after the bad storm. What is it? Not Katrina. What was our bad storm?
You had Isabel.
Isabel.
And I had been over to the college, and I was completely devastated. And I was at home, and I had a landline phone then, but I remember everything was down. It was awful. And something fell on the floor, and I picked it up, and it was a picture of what is Dr. Payne's name? Liddell and Jean. And I picked it up, and I called them. And they had known about the storm, and he said, I remember calling her and saying, Jean, quickly, Barclay's on the phone telling about the college. And I could almost hear the pain in his voice, you know. Wasn't that a sad time with all those trees down? In the
It was unbelievable.
I mean, people today would not realize what our college looked like.
It was unbelievable.
Was that one of the hardest times when you think about your experience, your time at the college? What was really devastating? That was a difficult
That was one.
Yeah, that would certainly
Even to all
be.
of us, even if Kathryn retired, then
Right. I remember often if you would have a storm like that, the first place you think of all these trees would be the college.
Right.
And that would be one of the first places I would come, and I couldn't believe what I saw.
You know, one of the strangest things about that, everybody always says, oh, you're right there by the railroad tracks. You all don't hear anything but the trains. And I said, we never hear the trains. And I remember how eerie that was, though, when those trees fell across the tracks after Isabel. And at night, I didn't realize until with the windows open, we had no electricity for like 6 days. We had nothing, no anything. And the eerie nothingness of not hearing the trains. We never know the trains in the college students group, but not hearing them was like...
You noticed the absence.
It was just really eerie. It really was. The kids, of course, love it when there's a power outage for about 24 hours. And then after that, when there are no showers and it's hard to get their food, you know, it's not quite so much fun. But, you know, but they do get excited about a possible snow day.
Yes. Oh, yeah, everyone loves it.
Even though you might think they're about 6 years old.
Exactly.
There they are.
Everybody loves a good snow day.
Right.
Well, any other memories or stories? You all have been great. You really.
Well,
full of
you
good
know,
stories.
I'm sure there are many more that come to mind at times. I have just thoroughly enjoyed all my time at Randolph-Macon, and still do, because I still go to the baseball games. In fact, the baseball team, when I moved a year ago, moved me. They moved. I only had to move a block, but Ray had all the boys over there, and they were wonderful. It was great, and I do go to all the games that I can, and feel like I'm staying in touch.
That's wonderful. That's a really
Coach would think Kathryn has carried on in his absence.
And we had at homecoming, we would always I would work in the morning, open the bookstore, and then I would have a cocktail party afterwards at homecoming. And I had been working for a long time getting food and all of that ready, and we would have a lot of our friends, alums back, and that was fun. I loved it, and a very exhausting time, but fun.
I sure didn't have people over to my house afterwards. I can tell you that.
After you were working, right?
But I think one thing is, we were talking earlier about how the students had changed. A great part of the students haven't changed at all.
Kids
They're
are
still-
kids. They're students
are
are
kids.
students.
They come here in the small college environment with the close-knit faculty and staff, relationships with the students, where they are nurtured. I'm sorry, when people say, oh, give them a hands-off thing, they're not here. We're here to make, they are our children. We just refer to them as that, You got to let them grow up, but I mean, this is the place for them to be. But they have changed. The kids today are, of course, with cell phones. Oh, my goodness. And the computers, and they like ordering their books online. They're always in touch. They're very different. Like the ones we have now, we call them the millennium children. They are always in touch. Their parents, they're much more involved with their parents. It is much more common for parents to call a professor or call the president of the college or call us.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they don't
to
hesitate.
intervene on the student's part. There's always calling. They think, that. Have you noticed that in the library? I mean, anywhere, I think you notice that. The parents, that's much more.
I only saw one time a parent go through the line when buying books with the student.
Yes. But
Now that was really going over. But we just, I thought, now how long is that boy going to be here? Here's mother right there with him, picking out the books,
that is
getting in line and paying for the books. And I
much
thought,
more
this
common
is ridiculous.
And some of the
Especially probably
students,
in the bookstore, but
yes.
you see a lot of that now. The parents want to just
yes,
take care
the
of it while they're on
parents,
campus.
the parents want to do it, and sometimes it is completely embarrassing to the students,
Right.
as it would be to me. Other students, it's expected. There's this tightness thing that they're going on.
My kids were always happy when I left.
Then they no, they would do that. One thing about these students that really warms my heart, and this millennium generation or whatever is, they are very community service oriented. Our fraternities, our Alpha Phi Omega, we have things, Habitat for Humanity. They care about other people. You ask them to raise money for something and make donations, they will do it. You ask them to go, they will do it. They will fill jars in the bookstore. They are very concerned about their fellow man, about the planet, and about people in other parts of the world. They truly are, and I just want to say that that's a joy to watch them get together and plan things about how we're going to go out and help somebody or help. Oh, they need our help, and somebody says, "Well, what do we need to do?" Not, "Oh, I haven't got time to do it," and they're.
And I think a lot of times that's the way they were raised also.
Mm-hmm.
They've got parents who are very
instilled in them.
community oriented.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
It's a really good thing. I think really good things. And the students are one thing. I don't know, but do you have any more questions? One thing I don't even know what Kathryn knows about this, and you probably do. But I was talking to parents about it at the open house about our new focus on campus. I have found out from talking to parents over the last 5 or 6 years, too, that parents and students now are really interested in outcome-based education. They want to know that when their child graduates from Randolph-Macon College, that the child is a job lined up or they can get in graduate school. I have to say, the parents were very, very interested in this. They heard a session on that, and that was called, I believe, President Lindgren's calling it the edge or something like that, to give our kids an extra edge in a lot of career preparation and things, which is...
And they have a little one-page brochure there.
Or something about that.
Well, of course, so many people immediately say, well, liberal arts college, you aren't trained for anything. And this is why you get this attitude, I think, at times. They want to know
what they're going to do.
What they're going to do.
You can have the best of all possible worlds here, where you do get a wonderful liberal arts education, but also have some direction, because we have such a great internship program that's great, that connects them with our alums, particularly not just in the world of athletics, a realm of that, but our old athletic alumni are so good about connecting with our students and everything. It really is like a family. And we must all remember that the place it all starts is the Randolph-Macon bookstore.
Thank you.
Exactly right.
Exactly right.
I'm glad you really opened my eyes to that. I can see it now. But that is true. And your connections go deep and over a long period of time.
They do indeed. Mm-hmm.
We share people in some.
I hear. I get Christmas cards from students from of course, they're baseball players. But Phil Emerson had nothing to do with. I get a Christmas card from Phil every year with his family on it, and he sent me a picture with the
I have one
with the Queen.
With the Queen, yeah. When he met the Queen, that was quite something.
That was something, but
they don't forget.
They don't forget. That is the great thing.
That is
really
the place, and that's why it's important. Other schools have learned about the ones that have moved their bookstore off onto Main Street or moved it off campus, and from the beginning. I remember Kathryn said you stay by the student mailboxes, which is not nearly as important as it used to be, by the way, because of email and stuff.
No, forget the mailbox. No, they don't.
And we don't don't have to worry about bad checks much anymore. Nobody cashes checks.
No, that's right.
Things that they're different, and with Walmart coming in and Target and all that stuff. We don't do any film developing. The posters are gone. The greeting cards are gone. The music department's gone. Everything that we had, we downsized.
You have to change.
We have to
change your way of thinking.
We have to change. But nationally, the NACSA Bookstore Association says that is our job, is to just to roll with the punches and to find out what our niche is and to keep it our value to the college and make everybody aware of that and to keep on doing our job as best we can. And we shall.
And you shall. And I think you're up for the challenge.
Exactly.
Carry on.
And thanks.
She
And
will-
Kathryn is
she
so
will
funny. The
carry
last
on.
day in the other bookstore, of course, she spent all these years in there, Lord, and it hadn't looked at it. It was empty and it wasn't looking good. So I said, Kathryn, do you want to come over? She said, I believe I'll just stay home and read my book. Thank you. She was
I
too
did
funny.
not want to look.
No. And it's still, everything. When we went in there, I didn't go in there. In Kathryn's office, which is my office, I was thinking about that. What's important. That was also where I was when the state trooper came with Mr. Balls to tell me that my son Tab was dead. Who was a cop. So I have memories of joy in there, and I have memories of in that office of finding that out. I have memories of being in there with about 13 black football players. We were packed in there while you in there. And I was letting them have it about rap music, about gangster rap music. And I said, when we first got music, and I said, we are not going to have that in here. I am not going to have those things where people use the N-word and say demeaning things about women. I said, how in the world can you encourage me to do that? and I was telling about people working for civil rights and growing up in Prince Edward County and all that, and they went, Barclay, we would never buy another rat thing. We will never buy another one. They said, take it out, and they were laughing about that. But I said, but that's where it's just the comfort level that you feel free. All of that stuff, I had all those memories in there. Taylor taking off his pants, putting on his shorts. And then I thought, I don't need to go back in there anymore. It will be down, but it'll be...
We even sold railroad tickets one time.
Oh, I had Ivan with... Yeah.
That Ivan was the one I was saying. We had one boy who would, poor thing, he would walk into the office and want his ticket, and he walked. He was smart. He was brilliant guy. I'd love to know what happened to him.
Autistic, but he was brilliant.
Yeah, I think he must have been autistic. And the whole time he's talking to him. Finally, I said, Ivan, get in that chair and sit down. I can't work if you do that. And he did it. But then pretty soon he up again, walking around.
And you talk about not being able to get anything done. And then when I came on, I did it for a couple of years, and Kathryn said, I think it's time you put a stop to this.
That and selling stamps.
Yes, we still do that.
In the necks.
We still do that. With the train tickets, we didn't make anything.
We were supposed to do that as a service.
That means we had to call Amtrak so they could be picked up. They'd have the money. Kathryn, did we actually sell a ticket? We just had to make the reservations.
We made the reservations.
And if it was busy,
computers, they just do.
Listen, if you're busy, you couldn't even get that. Or if it was coming, and all day long that day it would be busy. Everybody was trying to leave for vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, for Christmas vacation. They were a pain, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. I did not like it.
We didn't.
It was ridiculous.
Did you have to do that for years and years?
No. We didn't do it very long. And Ivan about put the end to that.
I think Amtrak helped too, because then they started taking the children's money, just to letting them get on the train.
Right,
if there was room, they started doing that.
Right.
That's what they do.
No.
But anyway,
we didn't handle any money.
We had famous things. We had fun times when they'd make movies on campus. And we had. Kathryn, were you here doing that? They made that one.
What movie did
they made the story of Bill W. at the KA house about the man who started Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think Michelle Pfeiffer, somebody was in it, and they let the KAs, they told them they could sit on the stairs and watch if they didn't make any. They turned that into like the meeting hall for the AA people. I saw it on TV. I'm sure the college has it somewhere in the archives.
Remember when Whitney Houston was here and sang?
Yeah, she sang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I can't tell you.
But anyway, Michelle Pfeiffer said, the boys said, we were talking about living by the train. She said, let's get this thing over with. Or, God, please don't make, I'll say it wasn't Michelle Pfeiffer, it was somebody else. But anyway, a famous movie star was really letting them have it and saying, just be quiet, we're going to get this thing over with. And they'd go, but it's the Tropicana train. And, of course, 15 minutes later, the Tropicana train, they were trying to tell them not to start to shoot then. And, of course, she was mad. And anyway, but they were laughing about that. And James Garner was in that film.
No,
his brother came in the bookstore, but they fed the people upstairs in the Kaufman Gallery. Kathryn, that's right. That's where, after you were gone. And then we had a movie that some of our players were in. Christian Slater was in a movie that was here. Oh, that was The Contender. Now, that's when we've got the alumni gym in the movie. That's the movie about, and then she's sitting there, and they're pretending that our alumni gym is like the Capitol gym, like that the congressman can use. Oh, uh-huh. And she's sitting there, and they came to film. And of course, we
didn't know any of that.
We thought that was kind of fun. And anyway, it's just been, there are many other wonderful things, but we don't have all day.
We've taken almost all day.
Well, I want to thank you for all the time you have spent and all the good stories you've shared today with Making Memories. Thank you.
It has been a pleasure, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynda. Nothing is more fun than for me to get together with Kathryn Stevens, who gave me my whole career here at Randolph-Macon, if you want to call it that. Thank you, Kathryn, for hiring me.
Thank you.